Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ask a Death Doula. Here's to remind you that the Good Death Seminar Series is on, and it has been so incredible. We are meeting in community. We are doing live Zoom seminars. We are answering questions, doing group discussions. Please don't miss it. If you'd like to join, the link is below. Okay, I want to welcome you today to a beautiful podcast titled, What is Hospice Care? What is the hospice gap and how you can fill it, which is incredibly important. Again, this is education for positive change, because each and every one of us will show up for somebody at the end of life. Knowing how to do that changes everything, and having the information is empowering, and most people don't have this information. So let's break it all down. Let's first start with, what is hospice care? And I want to introduce you again to this beautiful model of care that was developed. And I want to go back to its origin so that you understand how it got to the place today where there are huge gaps in hospice care and what we actually need to do to fill them so that everyone can have a positive end of life. So let's talk about hospice care, which I love. Let's talk about the origin. It first started in, I want you to know that the word hospice actually means host house. So it started as a house that took care of people at the end of life. And it started in the 1960s in England by a pioneer named Dame Cicely Saunders. She was a British nurse. She started it with herself, a social worker and a physician, and they started a hospice house. They founded the St. Christopher's Hospice in London in 1967. That's the year I was born. That's kind of interesting, which became the model for hospice care worldwide. Now, Saunders introduced the concept of palliative care. That's, managing symptoms, focusing on pain management. She also had a holistic model, because we're holistic beings. So the physical pain management, emotional support for terminally ill patients. So this beautiful model of care that then got picked up in the United States as the hospice movement and started gaining momentum in the 1970s. And the first hospice in the US was in Connecticut. It was Connecticut Hospice, and it was established in 1974. Now, this was really important to understand how it all started. And when it started, it was a nonprofit entity. So again, time, the hospice nurse having time with the patients, holding that space for them, creating a sacred space, allowing them to really guide that patient through this end of life journey with time, was the success of the model. And time is our greatest medicine. Now, in the United States, it started in 1974 with that same model, but in 1982, it was introduced as a Medicare hospice benefit within the government system. So now it is reimbursable to hospices within the insurance system. So again, in 1982, Medicare hospice benefit was created, which provided funding for hospice care, and it was reimbursable. So no more was it funded with volunteers or funded with grants or funded with raising money in the nonprofit sector. It became a reimbursable institution, and with that came many challenges. So what happened is that hospices began to emerge as for-profit. So they saw there was an opportunity here. And I always want to say positive things. I don't think anyone ever goes with the intent of not doing the right thing. Let's just put it that way. We always want to always have the benefit of the doubt. But what happened is that there was a real opportunity for expansion and money to be made. And so you saw the emergence of now for-profit hospices. So hospices began to emerge as for-profit entities in the United States, primarily in the late 1980s and 90s, following the establishment of, again, the Medicare hospice benefit that was in 1982. The guaranteed reimbursement from Medicare, so a guaranteed reimbursement from Medicare, made hospice care an attractive business opportunity, leading to significant increase in the number of for-profit hospice providers. So what are the challenges with that? I'm going to tell you the main challenge, and the one that is the biggest variable here is time. There no longer is time with your dying patient, period. So if you think of hospice model now as a consultant to that family, and what does a consultant do? They have a quick meeting, they advise you, and then they go away, right? And if you think of hospice now as a consultant, no longer there with time, and Medicare determined that the average visit of a hospice worker is in the home of a dying patient for no more than 30 minutes a day, on average 30 minutes a day. End of life is 24/7. So it took away, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, the greatest asset of hospice, which is time. So now the for-profit, they get paid the same thing no matter how much care they give, broke it down into this minimal, fragmented. I even heard from my hospice, as a hospice nurse, I was visiting once a week for 1 hour if that person was stable. Yes, you could add visits if something was going on. It really is pretty intense to try and fit them in. However, it is possible. I even heard of the Medicare benefit in some hospices having one nursing visit in every 14 days. So not even sure how that would work at all, because this barely works with once a week. So challenges came into the new system, and I will tell you, it took away everything that made it effective. And I want you to also know that hospice workers are absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. And they are killing themselves trying to make a difference. So this is a huge challenge. And I'm going to be very honest with you, just does not work. Because the minute you put a dollar amount and the minute you put a time limit on end of life, you're doing something wrong. I'll say it again. The minute we put a time limit and a dollar amount on end of life care, we're doing something wrong. So with the for-profit came the fragmented way that we practice hospice care and the very minimal amount of time that a hospice worker is in the home. Medicare determined it's an average of 30 minutes a day. So what do we do with all that information? So I think that here's what I want to say to you. And I think that when we identify something that's not working, try and come up with a solution. I think a lot of times in our world, we point, and again, there's no judgment here. This is just observation and clarity. You never want to start getting negative, because does that really help anything? No, you want to identify where we were, where we got lost. So where we were with the birth of it in England with a holistic model, beautiful, with time being the greatest medicine, where we are now with a mostly for-profit, even the nonprofits, a fragmented system, hospice workers not in the home more than 30 minutes a day, not working. Where do we have to go to? What's the solution? So here we are, right? We want to come up with solutions. So let's talk about that. So there's something that I call the hospice gap. And again, it's a fragmented system that we have currently, and it just does not work. Now, think about this. 98% of hands-on care for end of life is done by family caregivers. 98%, and they usually don't know the first thing about how to do that. It's absolutely cruel, and it doesn't work. So we need change. So what I've identified is what I call a trifecta, causing a huge increase in the lack of what I call good deaths, right? Because we want to have everyone have the access to information, education, and support to have that good death, which, by the way, we only have one opportunity to have end of life go well. We cannot go back and do it again. So let me talk to you about the trifecta that I think is causing a huge increase in the unfortunate lack of good deaths. Number one, death is the number one fear in the world today. And let's just take a minute. How did something that 100% of us will all go through become the number one fear in the world? How did something that we've been doing for thousands of years, by the way, all over the world, become the number one fear? Is it because we've just removed it from our awareness? Yeah, I think so. Because I will tell you right now that I have been honored and privileged to see some of the most beautiful end of lives, and what patients are saying, what they are telling me that they are experiencing as they get close to the end of life. If you ever were privileged and honored to be part of that, you will never be afraid of end of life again. Never be afraid. In fact, I believe it's our greatest teacher about how to live. So the trifecta is death became the number one fear in the world. Number two, the very late time that people are coming on to hospice services. So hospice is your end-of-life care provider, holistic modeling care in theory, right? They really now are the consultants to that end of life, running in and out, but not with time, which is how we teach. If I'm supposed to, as the hospice nurse, teach the family how to do end of life care, how can I do that with 1 hour once a week? It's impossible. Now, we don't talk about end of life. We teach our doctors how to keep people alive, but not how to support end of life in its natural, sacred way. In fact, all the things that we talk about, you have to fight these diseases, he lost his battle. All the things that we're setting up consciously or unconsciously is to fear death. And so we're not supporting doctors in having that conversation and supporting people on hospice services. And so they come on the services very late for all these reasons, that it's the number one fear. So people are avoiding the reality that they are at end of life. Our medical profession is usually giving them options on how to keep people alive, and we expect doctors to fix it. And so people come on hospice services so very late in their process, many times with just a few days. How does that work? It doesn't. The average number of days that people are in hospice right now is 14 to 16. Hospice services are good for 6 months or less if a doctor determines that you have a life-limiting disease process, that if it runs its natural course, your end of life will be in 6 months or less, you can get on hospice services. People are coming on with just a few days. The average is 14 to 16 days. Do the math. It doesn't work. It doesn't give us any times. We're running in, putting Band-Aids on it. And then the third trifecta is the short amount of time that hospice is in the patient's home. I was there for 60 minutes once a week. Medicare determined it's 30 minutes a day. Think about this. This is just not working. So we want to understand what is needed. If hospice can't fill the gap within the system, because that's how it's run now, and think about this, hospice is your end-of-life provider. That's it. In the United States, that is it. It's your one stop. That is your choice. That is all you have. And I remember going to my CEO of my hospice and saying, most of these end of lives are not going well. We have to do more. And he said, that's all we can do. We can't do anymore. And I was like, no, I'm not accepting that. End of lives are not going well for most of these families. We know that. We're the end of life provider. And you're telling me that's all we can do? We can't give them any more? No, we have to find a way. So let's find that way. Let's do it together. So when we talk about the hospice gap, and we know that hospice in its origin, beautifully set up, beautiful model, with time being its greatest commodity, right? Time being its greatest asset. So despite its origin in the ideals, the current hospice system falls short of this practice. With many, 98% of the hands-on care is being done by family caregivers. The hospice nurse is supposed to teach the family how to do the end-of-life care. If she or he is there for 1 hour once a week, they're full of fear. It's virtually impossible. People are on hospice services for a few days. It's virtually impossible. So what can we do to fill this gap? This is what I'm going to advise to you. And I want you to remember, we have been dying for thousands of years. We know how to do this. And I also want you to know that death once before this was revered as a sacred part of the end of life and the life journey, a sacred ritual, a sacred part. Let's bring that back, because when we bring back the sacredness of death, we are bringing back the sacredness of life, and that is how we change the world. So I want you to educate yourself, empower yourself, gain the knowledge about how to care for someone who is dying before you ever need it. This was a skill 100 years ago that a grandmother used to hand down to a grandchild. You can access this by going to doulagivers.com and joining the level 1 end of life family caregiver training that is done live monthly by myself, and I'll stay on and answer your questions. It's 90 minutes. It'll change your life. Number 2, ask the right questions. When you want to investigate going on hospice care, Make sure that you are choosing the best option for you and your family. Ensure that you're informed about the care options and facilities available. You are the consumer. You have choices. I'm going to share with you some of the questions that you should be asking them at the end of this podcast. And I want you to know that planning ahead for what we would want or not want for end of life care in what you call an advance directive is one of the key ways to ensure a good death. Why? Number one, we need to put things in place. We need to let our families know what we would want or not want. And if I want to be home, which 9 out of 10 people want to be home at the end of life, what do we need to put in place to make that happen? What do I need to do to support my family to make that happen? Get a doula giver, have that doula in the home, make sure that there's enough support. Whatever that means, do it now and choose what quality of life means to you. You can also access the 9-choice advance directive document by Doula Givers for free at doulagivers.com under the free resource center. This is why we're here. We are an institute to give out free education and information for positive change. You'll find all of these great resources there. So plan ahead with your advance directive, educate yourself on the natural way that end of life unfolds and how you can support somebody in that space, and also ask the right questions to a potential hospice. So let's cover that. Let's cover what are the questions that you should ask when choosing a hospice. So remember, you are the consumer. I know that when we're in that shock phase of getting a terminal diagnosis with somebody we love, sometimes we even forget the simplest things. What did I have for breakfast? I can't even remember. Fear is paralyzing. And that's what I see a lot at the end of life, that families are just paralyzed. This is the last time you have with your loved one. I know you want to care for them. I know you don't know how, and I know you're frightened. We want to remove that, reduce that fear, and invite you into learning this before you ever get there. It's like having a blueprint. It's like having a roadmap. It's like having a drill. And once we get there, it's so much different once you've already gone through it. Now, when you are choosing a hospice for your loved one, you want to ask the following questions to them. Number one, you want to ask them what services are included in your hospice care. Just ask them that. What services will you provide me? Number two, who will be part of the care team and how often will they visit? Get clarity. Many of my families will say, I have no idea who's the nurse. I have no idea who's the social worker. I don't know who any of these people are. It's a whirlwind for people. Get clarity on who's on the team and how often each one of them are expected to visit. Number three, ask them, how is pain and symptom management handled? One of the key things is remembering that quality of life, every single day is the goal for as many days as that person has. And tight symptom management is the key to that. So when we want clarity around that, ask them, how is pain and symptom management handled, and let them answer you. Number four, what support is available for families? What's available for my family? Do you know one of the things that end-of-life patients are the most concerned about is their spouse, is their family member. They know that when I would come in as a hospice nurse, my patients, my hospice patients in their hospital bed would say to me, look what I'm doing to my family. Look at them. And the family would be in shock, not sleeping, not eating, walking into walls. They weren't wrong. So think about this. This person is dying, and the thing that they are now burdened by is the stress that they're putting under their family. Not only that, but it prevents the last opportunity for those conversations. This is the last time that they have with their loved one. It should not be full of fright. It should not be all disconnected. We have to do better. And so ask that hospice, what support is available for my family? The next question, how does hospice handle emergencies or urgent needs? Do you have an on-call nurse all of the time? Some hospices don't, many do. But here's the reality of that. There's one nurse on call. And if she or he has multiple calls, it goes in accordance of who called first. So you want to make sure you understand what their protocol is for handling emergencies, after-hour calls, and urgent needs. And then ask them, what are the patient and family's roles in decision making? Will you invite us in? Are you going to listen to us? This is really our journey. And a lot of hospice, again, the hospice workers are absolutely beautiful. The unfortunate thing is they're not there very much. So in a week's time frame, 7 days, there could be a complete dramatic shift in that family circumstance. I can't tell you how many times as a hospice nurse I walked into that weekly visit and this person had been suffering for days and things had been changing for days, or that person is actively dying and the family has no clue. And I said, why didn't you call? And they said, we didn't know. We don't know what's happening here. This can't be this way. So ask, what are the patient and family's roles in decision making, and make sure it's an open conversation. And so this is incredibly important. And let's go back. What is hospice care? Hospice is a beautiful model of care to care for somebody with a life-limiting disease process at the end of life. Its model is holistic: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It is done by a multidisciplined team, meaning there is a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, a volunteer. But you have to understand the hospice gap. There are huge gaps in time, which is the way that the model works, is that the hospice team is supposed to educate the family on how to do the end-of-life care. If there's no time allotted, how can that training actually take place? It can't. It can't. So there's huge gaps there, and we need to do things to fill it. And again, this is not to point fingers at anyone. This is all because of the reimbursement structure that came into play. So you have to know for you and your families what you need to do, that you can fill that gap so that you can have a complete, beautiful match and have the most positive end of life possible, because it is possible and everyone has the right to that. So understanding hospice services, 6 months or less of a life-limiting disease process. And I will tell you, usually the longer somebody's on hospice services, the better that end of life will go. You want to make sure you ask those questions to the hospice, and you also want to make sure that you understand how to fill the hospice gap. Educate yourself, learn how to care for somebody at the end of life before you ever need it. And that is free by Doulagivers Institute, with the free level 1 end of life family caregiver training live every month. And also plan ahead with your advance directive. Make sure that you think about what you would want or not want for end-of-life care. And again, you can get the 9-choice advance directive document by Doulagivers for free. All you have to do is go to doulagivers.com. In the free resource center, there's amazing material there. We're in this together. We can change the world to reduce the fear of dying by talking about the natural, sacred experience that it's meant to be, and by getting this free education into the hands of everyone who would like it. And that's why I ask you, please share the Good Death Seminar Series. It is on now. It is live. It's a 6-month series. It is amazing. Meet us in global community. It's every 2 weeks with a new topic. You make sure you can sign up below, and please make sure to share it with others. Post it on your Facebook group. Let people know about the free seminar. We want everyone to have access to this care and training, because each and every one of us will be called one day to show up for somebody at the end of life, and knowing how to do that changes absolutely everything. I love you all so very much. This was Ask a Death Doula podcast. Sign up for the Good Death Seminar Series below and share with your friends, and I'll see you in class. Have a great day, everybody.